the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, every single man, woman, and child in India will have their fingerprints scanned. They're going to have their retina scanned. They're going to have their demographic information all held in one massive, giant database. This is the largest collection of data in world history on a scale which you can't even imagine. Now, why am I talking to you about India? Because the US also has rules and regulations by which we're going to start gathering these type of data. Within 5 years, 3/4 of the world's population will be on a computer database. All of the demographic information about them, all of the identifying information about them, everyone will have a user ID number. And you'll be able to track what that user ID number does on the web, where they go, what they do, and so on and so on. So this is where the world is right now. Now, the pluses and the minuses of India's system. I'm telling you about the downside as well as the upsides. On the upside, what does this do for India? Why is India doing it? Because India pours tens of billions of dollars into social welfare, and a big chunk of it, as much as 40, 50% of it, doesn't reach the recipient. It's siphoned off by corrupt officials, by middlemen, all across the board. What this will allow them to do is that, here's a funny thing. Cell phone technology in America is backward. That I'm sitting in San Francisco and I can't get a signal. I've been in Rajasthan, India, riding camels, and I've had been checking emails on the camel, literally. In the middle of the Thar Desert in India. You can go almost anywhere in India and get better cell phone service. It costs a fraction of a cent per minute. There's, out of a population of 1.2 billion people, there are 700 million cell phones in India. Right? What this will allow India to do is that when you have a poor villager that needs help, that needs to receive government funding, the money can be wired directly to their cell phone. And that cell phone will be tied to your user ID, which means you can go and purchase services from it, from local merchants. Right now, the way the money is distributed, you have to spend the money locally within your village, and again, you get ripped off because you're bound by it. Once your ID is established, you can go anywhere and spend the money that the government gave you. So it's going to cut corruption down by a huge amount, because now you're going directly from the government database directly to the peasant. Okay. You're talking about electronic banking. We're dreaming about it right now. We have a couple of startups that are talking about doing cashless transactions and so on. Forget it. These people are in the dark ages. You have to go to India to see the type of electronic banking they're already doing over there and how advanced they've become in these areas. You go to Korea and see what they're doing over there. You go to Japan. You go to other countries in the world. You see how far advanced they are in taking advantage of these new technologies. We're sitting in Silicon Valley, not even getting stupid cell service. We're getting pathetic internet access. The rest of the world is moving much faster forward, and they're figuring out how to harness this data much faster than we are. The negatives, all the security, surveillance, and so on. But you know something? The villager in India who's starving doesn't care about whether the government is tracking every time he goes to the bathroom or not. What he cares about is feeding his children or her children. So there are a lot of pluses and minuses, but this is where the world is. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, first of all, let's talk about open government. In fact, I want to dispel a rumor. Our friends at Data 2.0 posted a blog. They echoed what was said by some bloggers last week about Data 2.0, Open Gov being dead. Anish Chopra and Vivek Kundra, who are the masterminds of this strategy, happen to be good friends of mine. I sent them some of these articles and put them on the defensive. They're not allowed to comment on public policy. They're not allowed to comment on negotiation. But I'll tell you one thing. As I was driving in this morning, I heard on NPR that we're talking about a government shutdown in the next month as well. The likelihood of Data 2.0 being shut down is about the same as the likelihood of government being shut down. That's a negotiation. Yes, tentatively funding has been cut from $35 million to $2 million, but it's negotiation. The fact is that the IT dashboard itself has saved the government $3 billion already. You go and educate a few congressmen and senators, and even they can realize that $30 million saving $3 billion, changing society, is a pretty good investment. unlike most of the things that we spend our government funds on, right? So it ain't dead. And I can't quote my friends. I spoke to Vivek at 6:15 this morning because I sent an email to them last night saying, hey, I'm speaking at the Data Duo conference. I know you guys are not going to dial in as Jeff requested you to do, but if I go there and talk about Data 2 and have egg on my face, you're going to regret it. So I got a call from Vivek this morning, and we chatted about it quite a bit. I'm confident that this thing is going to succeed and prosper. So anyway, the type of data that's available, just scan through the list. I mean, these data sets have already been made available. Everything from how much my friends at the White House make to unclaimed bank accounts to energy efficiency and so on. There are hundreds of thousands of data sets available today for you to build on. What does all this mean? Let me discuss it a little bit. Three implications over here. Number one, I don't know if you folks realize that I'm talking about Web 1.0, but there was a pre-Web 1.0 world also. It was called distributed computing client server. That was when you had systems running on multiple machines and data being stored on servers. This is going back 20, 25 years. Before that, you had a mainframe era in which you had data being stored on these old massive machines that would take, that would consume 2 or 3 rooms like this just to store. The majority of the world's systems, computer systems, San Francisco systems, the government systems, the systems of Charles Schwab and Company, the systems of almost every major corporation right there, out there today, still run on those legacy systems. They're running in languages like COBOL, sometimes Fortran, languages that you haven't even heard of. They're managing data, like the data I put up in the Web 1.0 world, they're managing that level of data. And that's where everything resides right now. That's where all the action happens. Our society, our public services, our business services all run on these old legacy systems. My iPhone, again, over here, has more processing power than one of the mainframes had 40 years ago. Yet the systems that we're running today were designed for those. They run on teleprocessing modules like CICS and IMS. You folks probably don't know what that is. But one of the largest government contractors, Computer Associates, they're still peddling IMS. I had written an article in TechCrunch about California's legacy systems. I had a senior vice president from Computer Associates rip me to shreds for saying that IMS was antiquated. IMS was built 60 years ago, right? And that's what our systems run on. And you still have these government contractors who are charging the government billions of dollars to maintain this trash. One of you in this room could rebuild an entire system for a thousandth, maybe 100,000th of what it costs to maintain it. I cited an example in one of my articles about California's, the unemployment benefit system. The maintenance bill for it was $50 million. I said that this system could be rebuilt for $500,000. And I posted a challenge there. By the time it was done, the lowest bid came in at $25,000 to build the entire system. You could build an iPhone app that does exactly what that system does. And one of the kids in Silicon Valley could probably knock it off in a month. It would cost us $5,000, $10,000 at the most, versus $50 million just to maintain it, and probably hundreds of millions of dollars to run it over a period of a couple of years. So this is the bizarro state of technology today. What's the opportunity for you? Take all these data that the government is publishing and redo everything, rethink it. The vast majority of computer systems out there don't update databases, they report on information. That's, most of in the legacy world, you still have batch programs. I don't know if you know what that means or not, but you run programs at night which print reports, and people run those reports. Today, we have front ends for these systems by which you analyze these reports, but that's the world we live in. A lot of the data that's coming out there from the public sector and the private sector, you could take and rebuild applications on your iPhones or your Androids or on your tablets within days that provide more efficiency than anything you've ever seen before. Huge opportunity for you folks. You really can change the world. And if we can get our government to come to its senses and focus on removing all of this garbage that they have, we could save the government tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars over the next few years by rewriting the systems. And the people in this room could do that themselves. You could rewrite a big chunk of the government systems and save billions of dollars if you're allowed to do it. But we can't wait for the government. Fortunately, this is what Vivek and Anish did. They happen to be friends of mine. We talked about it a long time ago. What they did was they did an end run around the system. Rather than trying to battle the contractors, they said, okay, here's all the data. They got the president to endorse what they were doing. So President Obama himself supported this open government initiative. So they said, here's the data. Entrepreneurs, do what you want to do with it. And those are smart guys, but we're talking about some very smart people. The idea was to motivate people like you to go and solve the problems. Don't wait for government. Take this data and develop sophisticated applications. So number one, big opportunity for you. Okay. Number two, we need to rethink what we're happening. I've actually been on the warpath with Google itself because I've challenged the fact that they are promoting or allowing, encouraging, financing the pollution of the web. The way it works right now is that Google makes the majority of its profits on AdWords. They pay people to create bogus websites which bring them traffic. And advertisers pay Google money for traffic coming to them. So the whole system is bizarro. It's dated 10, 15 years. But the fact is this is the way the mighty big brother Google is making its money right now. Well, those old paradigms don't make sense anymore. I've talked about the fact that when I do a search, I don't want to get back a series of stupid text links like I got back 15 years ago when I first started using the web. When I go into a search, I want some action to be taken. I'm traveling to New York City. I want to make a hotel reservation. I want to eat at a nice Indian restaurant, is the example I discussed before. Well, when I do a search, why doesn't it just come back and tell me, OK, this hotel is available for this price, and tell me what sort of food you're interested in. You want to have Indian food? What sort of Indian food do you want? And then it goes and checks the availability of seats at the local dining places and make a reservation for me. I don't want links. I want action. But in almost any search you do, you want action as a result of what you've done. Well, we need to rethink the search paradigm. We need to rethink the way we use the data and come up with new ways of doing it. We need to come up with new ways of taking all this data and presenting them. So that when the genome data becomes available, perhaps what you do is you look at my genome and you prescribe medicines for me, which have worked most effectively with people that share the same DNA. That's quite easy to do. Once you have those data, once you have the health records, anonymously you can go and find out what treatment, what cures were most effective for what people. This is something you folks can do. I mean, I'm looking forward 3 or 4 years, but there are a lot of solutions problems you can solve right now. So, the opportunities are endless, and this is what I hope you're going to be discussing for the rest of the day today and tomorrow.
Yeah, well,
just today. But the opportunities are endless. You folks can change the world. This really is the new information age, and you can be the leaders. I mean, forget about Google, forget about Web 2.0. We're now ready for the next revolution. And this is where the fortunes are going to be made. People who can now go beyond Google, go beyond the current technologies, and change the world with data. Thank you.